Good afternoon and welcome to Pittsburgh City Council's Cablecast Post Agenda on snow removal for Wednesday, February 26, 2025. For the record, we're joined by Councilwoman Strasburger, who's joining us by line, Council President Lavelle, and I'm sure we'll be joined by other members shortly. And we'll announce them as they come in. Please, and we have a panel here today that's going to help us get to some answers. And I'm going to just start this by saying it's always, snow removal and city services are always an easy thing to attack, especially during campaigns. But with that said, I think residents do need answers. They do deserve the answers, and that's why we want the post agenda. But I won't forget during Snowmageddon and the brutal process that took place, dragging the employees and the Department of Public Works really through a lot. And that's not our intention here. Our intention here is to get answers and results for the residents. So let's hope that we'll work towards a good solution here. With that said, we'll start with our budget director. Do you want to introduce yourselves? We'll let you all introduce yourselves, and then Director, we'll give you a moment to, if you want to give a little. Do you have a presentation or anything you want?
No, I have no presentation.
Just jump right into questions. Does anybody have a presentation they would like to present? Okay, we'll just jump right into questions. Starting with this, go down the line and introduce yourselves for the public, please.
Hi, Pete McDevitt, City Council Budget Director, and also the Treasurer of the Equipment Leasing Authority.
Thank you.
Chris Hornstein, I'm the Director of Public Works.
Bill Crane, Deputy Director of Public Works.
Charlene Holder, Assistant Director, Secretary and Chief Examiner for Human Resources.
Rachel Heisler, City Controller.
Thank you. And we're also joined by Councilman Bob Charlin. As I mentioned, we want to get results for the residents. We want to get some answers and to know, not just for the residents. I do want to say we have a tremendous amount of really good, hardworking employees for the city. A lot of them are struggling through using old, aging equipment, breaking down, and we want to make sure that we're giving them good tools to do the jobs that we expect from them. So with that said, we're hoping that at the end of this post agenda we have some solutions and some ideas of how we can do things a little bit differently. Councilman Charlin, or Council President, did you want to go first? Hey, Councilman Charlin, do you have any questions? There's no presentations. We're just going to jump right in.
Okay. I mean, I guess I would start with, how is snow plowing going this year?
Broad question.
Yeah.
I think let's start with, the resources that we use to treat snow. So we have people, we have trucks, we use salt. Basics. Right now, trucks are very challenging for us. We have a snow fleet that is 103 vehicles. As of today, 37 of those vehicles are unavailable to us. So that is a situation that we're currently working with our vendor to, address. And we remain cautiously optimistic, but it is a limiting factor. Regarding the people, there are 153 persons assigned to streets divisions to plow salt.
Sorry, 153, is that what you said?
That's correct.
Okay.
And then there's a bevy of resources, and we can get into those details, that support us. There are additional resources that we use for treating steps, sidewalks, bridges. We assign 67 persons to those activities when that happens. And then there's the ability, somewhat limited, but the ability to kind of augment the driving staff when need be, with some additional personnel resources if needed. A little bit about the work itself. As I kind of shared with you, Council President, kind of before getting up here when you asked me for the staffing, I think it's also important to remember the work. There is, well over, by our estimation, there's about 1,140 road miles that need to be treated in the city. In addition to that, there is about 14 and a half, what I call the pedestrian routes. There's about 14 and a half miles of pedestrian routes that need to be treated as well. Regarding salt, I didn't know, Bill, if you could just kind of give a brief overview of how much salt we store, what locations, that type of thing.
Yeah, we store about 20,000 tons of salt citywide if we're at full capacity, and we use a magnesium treated salt that has a working temperature of minus 17 to 20 degrees, whereas regular rock salt just is effective to 17 degrees Fahrenheit. We sprayed that. It has a residual effect, so it sticks around. If we get another inch, another dusting, it's still on the road, and the roads start to open up with traffic.
All right. Well, that leads me to a couple questions here, and I was about to call you Council President Cal Smith, but do you want us to just? Is your plan for us to just kind of go back and forth throughout questions, or?
I want you to ask your questions, and if you have a second round, then we'll come back around again.
Okay.
But I'm hoping that we can get our questions answered, through the first round. So.
Sure. So how many, we have 37 vehicles that are unavailable right now. What is a full fleet?
Our full snow fleet is 103 vehicles that are capable of snow.
Okay.
So plow, salt.
So I toured my division, or the 4th Division, not just mine, in December. And it was really insightful for me to talk to the guys and talk to them about how the trucks are working. They did bring up a lot of issues that they have with even the trucks that are working. And I'm curious, like, what is our feedback loop? I know you talked a little bit about the, real-time safety this morning, but I'm curious, like, what the feedback loop is to make sure that we're not buying trucks that don't work for the guys that are working on them. Trucks that are too big, or I believe there was some issues with moving away from some of the diesel vehicles that ends up being a problem with, I guess transmissions. Like what is our mechanism to hear from the people that are actually in the trucks?
I think that's a great question. So there's a couple different mechanisms. One, thanks to council, we were able to add a position that was the manager of support services. That person's job responsibilities are managing our fleet in public works. So in terms of feedback loop on those issues that you might mention, whether it's a diesel, whether it's not, like we have a person whose responsibility it is to take that feedback. So we have not just the director or Bill or deputy director, but also somebody who is in a position or place to, monitor maintenance and see those issues, field those requests, and kind of validate the staff concern, if you will. I think vehicle size is always, quote unquote, a controversial subject for the workforce. It's very much about, providing the right piece of equipment in the right situation. As you know, Councilman, in your district, you've got the south side slopes. They're very steep, they're very narrow. Only certain size trucks can go up there.
Right.
So, our extended cab does not work there. It's not a place where we should provide that type of vehicle.
But you do have, I'm sorry, but you do have to understand, but that's not all we do.
Right.
3 months out of the year, it's snow and ice control. Then I have to move personnel from place to place. So an extended cab, crew cab, is the ideal truck to do that.
Yeah, and at that point, then I get frustrated because it takes so many trips to get out to, to cut grass or whatever we need you to do. So I understand you're kind of in an impossible situation where, one way or another, I'm gonna be angry. So I get that. I understand the challenges there, but in relation to snow removal, like I think the thing that I've learned more and more is actually talking to the lowest man on the totem pole and learning from their experiences and letting that guide, because we can sit in our conference room and say, oh, we're buying a bunch of trucks, sounds great, but if we're not talking to the person actually in the truck, we're not learning the lessons from them. So I'm always kind of concerned of what the feedback loop is to make sure that gets to you. Sometimes they're pretty good. They tend to be pretty good at circumventing that and getting straight to us. But that's probably not the most efficient mechanism.
Or the most ideal, right?
Yeah.
So I think that starts with us, is that having somebody that's responsible to their needs, which is the position that I mentioned, so that they can answer those questions. They can help, regarding the issue of diesel, like he's in complete agreement with the staff, right? Like operating gasoline on vehicle for snow and ice is just not suboptimal. is how I frame that. So we're getting that feedback. I think, regarding changing of the fleet, and this is, feedback that I've received from, changes to the fleet and environmental services is just an example of where we've been also let down, is that, if we are contemplating a change to the fleet, it's starting small. It's maintaining our standard, but, trying to test drive and really hone in on the exact type of vehicle that's most applicable here so that we can make it the new standard, so we can put it through its paces, so you will. Those are the types of things that we can do to get their feedback and to get them the actual pieces of equipment that they need to do their job.
Are you regularly touring the divisions, Bill?
Myself?
I know that you live in the divisions, but
Myself, I mean, I try to make as much as I can. I try to interact with the staff on a frequent basis. Am I out there as much as I'd like? No. But we're also talking about visiting 23 locations. You want to give equal time to everybody.
Yeah.
It's a Department of Public Works has a broad set of services, right? So I want to make sure that I'm focused on all of them.
Yeah. No, I understand that. And obviously we have not this year, or have probably never allocated enough for DELA. Continues to be a real challenge here with our budgeting. We spent, I think, an hour this morning talking about deferred maintenance for our technical system, or our JDE, but this is again more deferred maintenance, that as we continue to not invest the way that we should, we end up being in the situation that we're in, where 37 vehicles are unavailable, which is a third of the fleet, as has been reported here. Talk to me about overtime, or calling people in for snow plowing. How is that process working right now?
Sure. Right now we've split the division personnel into two shifts, daylight, and then 10 p.m. to 6 p.m. If there is a chance of, if there's a snow event, we can extend daylight to 6 p.m. and bring in the night shift, who's normally starts at 10 p.m. They would come in at 6 p.m. and we'd go into a 12-hour routine until we address the event. And then I think you're speaking to the weekend voluntary call out, or
Yeah.
So that's, you sign up ahead of time, and you are going to be on call if something happens, and if you don't get called, you get $50. I'm sure you're aware of the whole
No,
thing.
actually not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you're not called, you get $50, and if you are called, you'll get your rate of pay for the hours you worked.
Okay.
But you have to be on call. You're not at the casino, and you're not at your aunt's house. You need to be on call. And
Sure.
You need to answer the bell.
So I've asked this a lot before as a staffer, but how do we know when snow is coming? Can you?
If you find out,
Well, and the reason I know that we've got
Yeah.
ways of doing that.
Right.
You're not just looking at the Weather Channel and guessing, but at the same time, there have been a couple of snows that have snuck up on us
Yes.
this year.
that they were lake effect snows that just ballooned as they came down from the lake. I spent many hours with Mike Gable pre-snowstorm, and going over what we can do, what can we put in place. Spent many hours with Chris going over what we can put in place. But those snow bands come down from the lake, and they just pick up a ton of moisture, and then they just balloon at bad times at 4:30 p.m. In a Friday rush hour.
Yeah.
And everyone's going home at 2:00, and I didn't see that big blue blob until it's too late. That was, I think, 2 events hit at rush hour, evening rush hour.
Yeah, I'm thinking. Well, my memory on which ones are not great, but those are the ones that I think that we get the most calls about. That are
Sure. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
most frustrating. Talk to me about pre-treating.
Well, pre-treating, it would work if it hadn't rained or isn't raining. We can pre-treat hills and bad spots, brick and block streets. I don't want to blanket the city with a bunch of salt and it doesn't get used, but brick and block streets are a problem. And the hills, we go out and pre-treat the hills. I'm sure you're familiar. South Negley Avenue, to name a few. But yeah, we go out and we pre-treat. And like I said, the salt has a residual effect, so it gets ground down by the traffic, even if it doesn't snow, and it'll stay on the roads.
And sometimes, we have to be cautious with that, like Bill said, with rain, with the environment, but also the road itself. As we've found through our work in the real-time safety system, we've had our own accidents on streets that were previously treated. Why did they refreeze after a treatment? It's because there's no stormwater management in place. So we treat the road, melts the snow, the temperatures remain low, the water has no place to go, the road refreezes. Somebody comes along to do follow-up work, and then all of a sudden they're in an accident too. So those are conditions that we're aware of, that we work with our partners in DOMI and Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority to address.
The refreezes can, in the slopes, they're my big problem. Because it'll be like, hasn't snowed in 4 or 5 days, refreeze happens, and we're not in plowing operations, and I always feel like I have to call in a favor to get this street. Handler Street's the one that comes to mind, because Handler is a shadow, or has a lot of shadow effect on it. That's still remains a real problem, and has been a real problem for me this year. I will have additional questions here. The one thing that comes up all the time, we all get versions of this. From your perspective, the question always gets asked, why is it that when I drive out of the city into Munhall, the roads are pristine? I've heard so many different reasons. I've heard it's because Munhall doesn't have cars parking on the sides. It does. What is it that those municipalities are doing that we're not able to do?
They commit 6 times the resources that we do to removing snow and ice.
For 60 lane miles.
Right? We just had a conversation with Munhall yesterday about how we can partner together on a variety of services. And when the topic of snow and ice comes up, they have 60 lane miles, and they have 8 trucks out dealing with those 60. That's significantly more resources per lane mile than we apply here. It's a similar ratio that Ross Township uses. It's a similar ratio that Mount Lebanon uses, that Green Tree uses. I think the surrounding municipalities, because they're smaller, they choose to commit those resources to their local resources to that level of snow and ice removal, and that's the choice that they make for their residents.
And look no further than their garages and see what kind of equipment they have. And
Yeah, the ELA budgeting, I guess. All right, Madam Chair, I'll let others go.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from other members? Councilman Coghill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Back in your boss's seat, where I remember you best.
Yeah, I like sitting in the middle.
So, okay, I just have a few questions to start, and then I'll follow up on round 2. I'm sorry I missed the initial conversation, but I heard Councilman Charlin say there's 37 vehicles down. Is that right?
That's correct.
37 of those. They're dump trucks, pickup trucks, combination.
a little bit of everything.
But everything.
Right. What's our average age of our fleet?
The average age of the fleet that treats snow and ice it's very interesting. So specific to the Streets Division, the average age is 11 years. So if we had a properly maintained fleet, that average age would be about 5 years. Okay, so because the average age or the life cycle of the truck is 10 years.
It seems like a day doesn't go by where I don't get a picture, whether it be from the press or somebody else, as to one of our dump trucks on a McGann and Chester flatbed being towed. I think I've seen like 4 in the past couple weeks. It's filled with salt, by the way. Obviously they're not salting the road when they're being towed. So So, okay, we all know, I'm on Equipment Leasing Authority Board. I know the dire straits that we're in with across the board. It's not even just Public Works. If it were just Public Works, we could maybe, string something together or get you back in operating condition. But 37 trucks down, that's generally a third of our fleet. And we are leasing those vehicles still, right? I remember that was
8 leases,
kind of
yes.
my initiative, remember,
Yes.
4 or 5,
Yes,
5
we're
years
still
ago.
leasing. We're still leasing.
And it was
those.
really just to get us through, I felt like a winter or two, but we've continued to do that on a regular basis. I've heard from the men and women in Public Works that those two are not, the augers are jamming or something, they're not spreading salt efficiently, is that?
That's correct. And we
Correct.
call Herc, who's our vendor for the rentals. They come down and they repair them.
Oh, okay.
That was that story that broke, that all the broken rental trucks are up in one spot, rotting up at the First Division. That media outlet was totally wrong. I had them all sent there. 3 of them were operational, 4 of them were operational, 4 of them were broken. I said, take them all to one spot, so this mechanic just has to go to one division. And that was the
So they come
photo
down
that
and
surfaced.
they fix them right
Yeah.
away, yeah.
And if they're down for any length of time, we don't pay them for that length of time.
Right. And Director, you said 23 locations. Is that, we have 23 Public Works facilities?
I brought like divisions, locations,
Divisions?
right?
Yeah,
Like,
do we really? 23?
Yeah, there's like 23 different work sites that I would have to visit on a regular basis.
I mean, 23 places.
Facilities
Facilities, yeah, I mean,
Parks.
you're including the whole of the public works
Okay.
spectrum, not for snow and ice. There are 5 streets divisions, there are 6 parks divisions, and there's a bevy of other work locations out there.
And the 4th Division is back underway.
That's correct. We just had a very productive meeting with the contractor, myself, last Monday to
Great,
get
great.
to a common understing about how do we proceed
No
forward.
more mines. no
Well, I
more
can't say that.
foundations.
I can't say that. We're solving the foundational issue, yes.
We're not building on top of
Figuratively and literally.
uranium or anything like that.
Not that
we've
I'm
done
aware of
lately.
yet,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
anything can surprise me up there.
Right. So they're working now then. They're moving now. They continued their, because I know it went on pause with that foundation, but that they discovered. But
Yeah,
are
I mean,
they-
there
are
is
they
some
moving?
there is some minor site
They'll
work
be-
while we get through the final engineering on the solution for,
It'll be finished by next winter.
we are driving forward as fast as we can, so.
Did you talk to him about that?
Yes, I did talk to him about
Was he
that.
confident that he would be finished?
He was not confident.
He was not. Oh, jeez. Well, I'm hoping by next winter. I've been promising for 6 years now. They kind of gave up on me at this point, but I keep saying it's coming, and I do believe it is. We'll have to see. Hello, controller. How
are you?
Good. You don't have anything to do with the vehicles, do you?
I don't operate them, but I will share, based on, we did
Sure.
an audit in 2020 of snow removal. And in 2020, which the scope was 2016 to 2019, we had 129 total snow removal vehicles. And with the vehicles that are out, the staff at DPW is working with about half of the resources in terms of fleet. And we're spending, for the next 5 years, not including 2025, we'll spend less than $3 million a year on, via the ELA on fleet. And it's my understanding that includes our public works vehicles and our public safety vehicles. And I haven't done my ride-alongs with public works yet, but a fire truck costs about $1 million, an ambulance costs about $500,000, a ladder truck about $1.5 million. And when you're spending $3 million a year only, trucks break down. And ambulances break down, snow removal trucks break down, fire trucks break down, police vehicles break down, and the fleet is aging, and it's aging rapidly. And, because we're in a contracted period with city finances, per the capital budget, we are investing less than we had traditionally have for the next, from 26 through 2030. So I want to flag that fact. I think looking at the fleet compared to what it looked like, 6 or 7 years ago, and again, it's, as a recommendation we made in 2022, City Council actually allocated $470,000 in the 2022 budget towards fleet maintenance and upgrades. But it's just, I would say, without doing an audit, that it's just not enough money. The fleet needs investment, and that's across public safety and public works. So Just flagging those numbers. The last review, like I said, we released in, I think, spring or summer of 2020. So
I really appreciate those numbers. And I know those numbers only too well, obviously, being on the ELA board. And I know Peter McDevitt, he's also on the ELA board. We are investing $6 million into the fleet this year when, a study had shown only 5 years ago, I think we've done this study, that we should be putting, in a fleet of our size, we should be putting like 20 plus million a year in. So we're putting $6 million a year in, which is just not adequate. Not to mention now the costs of repairing, the costs are just astronomical. We just approved here not too long ago, I think it was some crazy amount, 20-some million dollars just in maintenance, basically, for this company to change the oil and, do things that come up. And that's going to be short because the older our fleet gets, of course, the more expensive it becomes to, manage. So on top of that, controller, the $6 million a year that we've been under investing probably by, $14 million a year for many years now. This is not, I think it's even goes back beyond this administration. But I will say, one of the reporters did a story the other week, and it was about the ARPA money that I say we should have used that money. We should have bought a whole new fleet, really, right? That's one thing we could have used that money for. Now these are real costs coming at us all the time now, whether it be in maintenance, whether it be in the vehicles that you're without. So I did do some research on that, and the former mayor, we put $7 million in I want to say 2019, $7 million in 2020, and then we put $3 million in of federal money, and that's it. And then we, promised to put $6 million in a year for the entire fleet, which is just not adequate. We're gonna see major expenses. So the fleet itself, we could talk about all day long. What about the men and women in public works? I mean, so do we have men and women sitting around because we don't have trucks that are operating, or how's that working out? Because I know we made a significant amount of hires in public works a few years back.
No one's sitting around.
Yeah, right. Because they don't have anything to drive.
Well, we have our crew cabs to get them around.
Right.
Put them in the crew, put it in the crew cab to do,
Right.
cold patch. It never ends. Whether it's snow or ice, or now it's going to be potholes, then it'll be grass, litter.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember, we're a year-round operation.
Right.
Obviously, from a fleet perspective, wintertime is the most intensive person. One person per
And the most
truck.
visible.
And the most visible.
I used to like winter until I became Public Works Chair. And I understand more than anybody. I know, depending on the time of day, is it rain turning into ice, you're just always going to have
Every storm's
problems. You're always going
different.
to have issues, right? No matter how many trucks, no matter how many vehicles you have ready to go, you're always going to have those certain storms that just get you, so I don't miss those at all. But okay, that's it for me for now, and then I'll probably follow up on second round. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilman Mosley?
Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair, and thank you for calling this. This is something that's been on the mind of folks all over the city. I think a lot of my questions have been asked by my esteemed colleagues, but one question that...
Could you point out where the esteemed colleagues would be? No, just kidding.
I'm surrounded by
He said steam, not esteemed.
Just kidding.
I'm surrounded by esteemed colleagues. That's one of the perks of being a member of this body. I guess my first question is obviously, I think we've talked at length about, the structural challenges with the fleet and the maintenance issues. But one of my questions is, this is something I've just been thinking about, over the course of the season, and some of the, the challenges we've had, and, obviously the feedback that we get from the public. Now, obviously you mentioned, when it rains, that really prevents you from doing pre-treating. But is there any type of other, besides like lake effect, there's a certain other kind of either like time of day or meteorological conditions that create unique challenges, to treating the roads and put you in a less favorable position than certain times of day or, certain, types of meteorological conditions that create, a bigger problem, for you to address the weather?
Well, two weekends ago, two weekends ago, we were under a flood threat. We were under high winds. We had a melt, so the ground was saturated. High winds. We're thinking trees are coming down. We had a huddle, and then we had freezing rain and snow, and we had locusts, and then boils. But we were preparing for all these things.
Oh my God, that's funny.
Preparing for all these things, and they all came, at once on what was it, Saturday afternoon, and that was President's Day weekend. So a lot of guys want the day off. So it was a challenge staffing up.
It was a challenge to have the vehicles ready. I mean, the boils were particularly painful. And, I think that speaks to how broadly challenging the environmental condition can be at times, right? I think our biggest fear is ice, always. Because it's not just, we know it's dangerous for the public, but it's extra dangerous for our own operators because we know they're out in it, and we know, we chain up, we know the ride is rough for them, and we know that we're doing the best we can with it. I probably fear ice more than I fear 10 or 12 inches of snow, without a question about it, for both our men and women that are driving and residents too. So those are always challenging. I wish I was a meteorologist sometimes, because then I could be more wrong more often and still get paid. That's my plug for that. But it's challenging for them too. Like, they know that their forecasts are always accurate, and we get our meteorological information from a wide variety of services that tells us what's going on. And I mean, I can say with 100% accuracy that none of them are right all the time. So we've bandied about different improvements to kind of insulate us, if you will, from that unknown. Some of those require us to work with our members to make sure that we're having minimal staff levels that can be responsive to conditions while we bring in additional resources. Those things take time. But the union is always a great partner with us in that. That's another way that we receive feedback, is through those conversations as well. Hey, if we were thinking about this, what do you guys think? Don't do that, do this. Or maybe you should think about it this way, or this might be easier. So, we try to be as nimble as possible, but, I think, as Bill will sometimes say, it's a bit of a battleship, so sometimes it's hard to turn. And Councilman Coghill and I have had that conversation in the past too, right? That, like, it's, getting the right resources there to a particular neighborhood. I mean, the other challenge I'll note is we had the one storm that apparently the East End got all the snow, and the west side of the city got none. It's not the easiest thing in the world to move a bunch of trucks from the west side of the city to the east side of the city in real time to be responsive to people.
Well, they move most resources from the west side to the east side. So they should be used to it by now.
Your ears perked up for that.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, sorry.
She just waits to pounce on
I
this.
know. That was a well-timed clip.
It was. Yeah.
Very well-timed. And so I came in a few minutes late, and so I just want to understand how many vehicles are in total, and how many vehicles are currently not operational.
So 103 in our snow board, as we call it. Those are the snow fleet, or the vehicles that are capable for snow. 37 are not operational.
And from your perspective, in a perfect world, if financing were not an issue, how many vehicles, should we have to be able to address the snow events that we have, in a typical winter? Now, we've known, over the course of the last decade, we've had some, climate change winters where it was like 75 in February, but it seems like, which is, to me, actually, I know a lot of people hate the cold, but, when it's cold during the winter, I feel a lot better, because I feel like, the climate change hasn't fully set in yet. But so in the winters where climate change hasn't fully set in yet, how many vehicles should we have to really address normal winter?
I mean, I think from my perspective, and Bill chime in, from my perspective, a number closer to what I think historically the controller mentioned, which was around like 123, that to me feels more in line with what I think residents would want to see in terms of just having the resource available to respond. That gives us a large number of trucks that would be able to be kept in reserve for the inevitable downtime that has to happen during especially repeat snow events. Certainly that 2-week period in January where we got back to back to back to back really hurt us in terms of vehicle maintenance because you just, for lack of a better term, you're just bleeding slowly. But that's a number more to me, but Bill, I didn't know.
Yeah, 120, and up of those operational, at least 90 that you could put on the road, and then have some in reserve.
I appreciate that. And then back to kind of my first question: is there, like, are weekends, more difficult? Because I go back to the Saturday before Christmas, there was a lot of, conversation about that. It was I think it started snowing probably around 3:30, 4 a.m. on a Saturday morning. And I know me and you were on the phone. I was actually driving back across like the Highland Park Bridge, and I was getting text messages and calls. And I want to thank you for always being so responsive, when I call you on those days, because I know your phone, is definitely ringing off the hook on those days. And there was a lot of people out because it was the Saturday before Christmas. And I know there was a number of accidents and things like that. Is it when like a 4 o'clock on a Saturday, is that like one of the least optimal times, or does it matter at all? Based upon the infrastructure that you have in place.
There's no good time for snow from my perspective.
Right.
I'll put it that way. I think certain times based on past practice, I'll say, are more challenging for us to staff up than others. Our people are people too. So like, as you mentioned, the weekend before the holiday is also their weekend before the holiday, right? And by all accounts, a little bit unforeseen on that particular weather event, if you will. So again, I think that speaks to the broader challenges. Can we take that input? Can we take that feedback? Look where we can be better. And, how can we position our resources to be as responsive as possible in all situations without, cutting service levels or making a managerial, what I'll call like a managerial challenge.
Sure. I think that exhausts my questions for now, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Also joined by Councilwoman Strasburger, who's online and has some questions. Councilwoman?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for being here today. I wish I could join you in person. I wanted to build off of some of the discussion we've already had, and I think it's been really helpful. I've heard some of this before. I met with you, Director Hornstein, earlier this season, and I was able to ask some of these questions. I'd like to ask them again because I think it's important to get them out for the record publicly. I've certainly been getting my fair share of questions and emails and calls from residents all over the East End this season. And, acknowledging that, what Controller Heisler said, and that we are going to face another couple of years of financial, I really don't want to call it austerity, but that's kind of what it is, until we retire debt from decades earlier. We're probably not going to be in a position to, unless we have an uptick or a sudden influx of non-taxable revenue, we're probably not going to be in a position to get back to the 123 trucks or more plus personnel. And then I also recognize, anytime soon until after 2027 is my guess. And then recognizing that the personnel can be challenging. It's not just the trucks, as you said, it's then having the personnel to be able to shift to winter activities when it's snowing, and then shift to other activities when it's not snowing, and it's a big puzzle. So I don't even know if we'd want to have, 6 times the number of personnel than we need or, than we currently have to be able to treat our roads, because that would present a different challenge in some ways. So what I'm getting at is, you said you're already talking to Munhall. That's great. Can you just outline for me, and I know some council members don't want to hear this, but just to try to find the solution for like the rest of this winter and next winter and the winter after that, what would be some of the challenges, personnel, union related, others, in like having those conversations with every single neighboring borough? Because the way I look at it, like if we're just not able to have the resources to manage our snow adequately, the more that could be done and through shared services, and we just pay them for those times, we don't have to have them on staff in all of the neighboring, the neighborhoods that have neighboring boroughs, once they're done making their roads shiny and clean, that frees up resources, right? And we can be able to treat the sort of inner part of the city a little bit more effectively. What are some of the, so my question is, what are some of the challenges to making that actually happen?
I think, purely logistically, I mean, you're talking about conversations that Bill and I would have to have with every single surrounding municipality. Those just take time. I think there's questions for those surrounding municipalities that, they don't want, the flip side that we hear from when I just have the anecdotal conversation with folks in surrounding municipalities is they also don't want to give up their level of service for their own residents to help the city. So one of the things that we have to give consideration to is the fact that like their residents, if they're going to provide this service to the city, they want to make sure that their residents would come first, which is, I think, perfectly respectable and understandable for any elected official to, want to protect their own residents in that type of shared service environment. I think one of the good things is that, we also provide services that maybe those residents, those neighboring services don't provide. So perhaps there's a sharing of resources, if you will, at optimal times of the year. Maybe there's things that we can do in the summer for them that they don't do that they would like or would be much greatly improved for them. I think the big limitation for us is time. There's certainly no limitation on creativity about having those conversations. I think that is an example of good government. If you can get to that kind of shared benefit for all, I think that's a really wonderful example of good government, and I'm happy to have those conversations.
I mean, that's great. I was expecting far greater hurdles that you were going to describe, like a laundry list. If that's it, I think I really do think that could be a possibility where it wouldn't be the permanent solution, ideally. Ideally, we'd get to a point where we have enough personnel and, more importantly, vehicles, but we're in a crunch right now, and I think we have to use creativity like that and good government practices like that. Because I don't think it's necessarily in the moment as the snow is falling when they're treating, whatever municipality is treating their roads, and then the snow stops and they're pretty much done. It's for us, what I've experienced, and I have this, I'm looking at my screen right here because I have this laundry list of incidents from, just the different complaints we've gotten from the various snowstorms. The majority of them are cul-de-sacs, smaller tertiary roads, where some of them hilly. They might be treated first, and then as you said, they're treated first, but then they're sort of the last to be hit with the snow removal portion of it. But 2 days after the snow stopped, we're still working to put in requests for 311 or direct requests, and they're just not getting done in a timely manner, even 2 days after the snow has stopped. And that makes some people feel like they don't matter to the city because they just happen to live on a cul-de-sac or a smaller road. Now, in some cases, are they in danger? Are they able to exit their road? Are they able to travel down? Yes, they are. But it's the general feeling, and important to me, the trust in government that is lost when we aren't able to get to them at all. So in my mind, even if it was a matter of, we keep saying Munhall, but Munhall finishes all their roads, and then a day later, they come and help us finish all our roads. Like, that's a plus and a win in my mind as well. I'd really like to pursue this. It's just me. I realize there might be some disagreement on council, but it's something I personally think is a great solution if we can work together to take the time to have those conversations. So it's not just the two or the three of you doing that yourselves. The only other thing I will mention that hasn't been mentioned is how are we thinking of hills versus flat areas versus hospital routes, emergency routes, because while the majority of the complaints I get for 2 days or so later that haven't been touched, especially when it's cold and it doesn't melt on its own, are in flat areas. I also then observe just myself living in Squirrel Hill, having South Negley, which is often closed, that the non-primary roads, secondary roads, tertiary roads that are quite hilly, where people in an emergency wouldn't feel comfortable driving to, leave their house after, even within the 12 hours or after the 12 hours after the snow has stopped. I just am questioning where it falls in the priority list for public edification and just as a reminder to all of us and to me.
Go ahead, Bill.
All right. Well, I think some of the neighborhoods you're talking about, especially in your district, Councilwoman, Shady Side and between Ellsworth, Baird, and Fifth Avenue is relatively flat, so it does go begging for a little bit while we address some hillier areas like South Negley and over in Garfield and East Hills, and that's the second division handles your area. So Von Lent and some of those Shady Side Lane, yeah, they do go begging until we get to them a little later. But if you have to be a responsible motorist too. I mean, you really have to be prepared for winter, and it means having snow tires, having good tires. Somebody told me there was a bus stuck on Loretta Street in Greenfield. It's a little short grade. And, did anybody check their tires? Did anybody check the tires on those buses? But you really do, as a motorist, you do have to take some responsibility for getting around in the snow. It just can't look like July all the time. But that's the reason for your flatter areas. That's one of the reasons they get done a little later.
Sure, no, and I appreciate that. And before I lived in Pittsburgh, I spent some time in New Hampshire, and everyone had snow tires, and people would take care of the plow. They would put plows on their trucks and do it themselves. So I can appreciate it's different everywhere. People certainly do need to take responsibility for, at the very least, getting their tires replaced or all-wheel tires. But I guess my question is, so yes, the flat areas, less of a concern, more of a just I'd like to figure out what the level of expectation or service is. But the bigger question here is for the hilly areas that are tertiary, that are, not going to be the priority because they're not a throughway, but they're still important for just the, especially if there's ice that's formed underneath and then snow on top, they're just for the general safety of people who might feel like they need to get out or have to get to a doctor's appointment, but it's still untreated. I'm wondering where those smaller but hilly streets fall in the priority list. Like, is it flat primary streets, or all primary streets, all secondary streets, and then the hilly tertiary, or like how does that fall in the priorities list?
Well, we prioritize by traffic volume, main drag, obviously hospitals, arterials that lead to interstate interchanges, so we can get folks out of town or get them to the larger roads. We do have each division supervisor and foreman is, painfully aware of their pain points as far as hills and smaller streets that go untreated and usually come back as a 311 later on in the event. That if they continually get missed, then we do a little deep dive and say, why was this missed for 2 events in a row? And you have to make sure whoever's in that area gets to the Shady Side lanes and the Von Lentz and all those other Canterbury Lane and all the other dead ends in your area, and then anybody's area really.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And then this is less of a question, I think, for anyone at the table, but I'd like to say it anyway. While I appreciate a 311 service, our new 311 service is very transparent about like the number of days it'll take to at this phase we're at patching potholes, or I've submitted several and it'll tell me how many days it'll take, and I appreciate that honesty and that level of service, transparency. But what's problematic about the snow removal level of service communication, and this is a communication issue more than it is an actual issue. There are people who are being told when they call 311 that they're made to feel that calling a 311 really won't actually change anything about the routes that drivers are choosing to follow. And there's this fine line between feeling like people are, setting that expectation correctly so people understand how the decisions are made. For instance, while the snow is still falling, this is the path that we're going to take. We will note this for 12 hours after the snow has stopped, because that's when we're really trying to, to clear effectively after a certain amount of time. We can expect removal X number of hours, whatever, 24 hours after snow removal. But I think we need to work on the communication back to the individuals to make them feel empowered when they call 311, and ensure that they're getting their expectations modified without feeling disempowered or like they're doing something wrong by calling. Because I would hope that, this Beelermont, we always get the request for Beelermont. It's not a main road, but it's very hilly, and it always takes us asking for it to get done, because it just doesn't, one treatment does not actually treat it. It needs to get salted again and again after a thaw and ice cycle. So whatever we can do to tweak the communication back to people as they're requesting snow treatment would be helpful. And again, I fully recognize it's probably not anyone here at the table, but I do think probably our really hardworking and wonderful 311 operators and our sort of outreach professionals and our DPW leadership could work together on figuring out what that exact right language is.
I think we can certainly sit down with Wendy and her team and, make sure that the consumer or the resident feels like their concerns being addressed in a timely manner. I think some of the answers, some of the canned answers, I'll say, that Wendy was going to give is that there are trucks in your area. We have an internal view of our AVL, vehicle locator, so she can actually see in real time if there is somebody in that area, and she has everybody's phone number, all the supervisors' phone numbers, and if there is a real concern, people call EOC if there's a real concern. But yeah, she's in touch with everybody. But we certainly want to feel like the consumer or the resident. I call them consumers, but they're getting what they want.
Yeah, and I think
we tried.
and I think it's.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely, and I know you do. Yes.
Yeah.
I know, like, when I work with DPW leadership, foreman, whoever it is, like, I always get the sense that everyone wants to do the absolute best work and best service. So I'm not, absolutely not questioning that at all. And while I don't have direct conversations with the people driving the trucks on a regular basis, I know they do too. So I don't think it's a question of that. It's really just the way that it's communicated back to the average person.
Understood.
I thank you, Madam Chair. That exhausts all of my questions.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And so now it's my turn. The moment you've all been waiting for. I do want to acknowledge again that our crews do a tremendous job. Our laborers work really hard. And in our area, they're an integral part of our community. So they're not just, employees of the city. They're part of our community. But sometimes we also know that they feel frustrated as well. They're riding on equipment that's, broken down or not enough or not inadequate in some ways, not enough staffing. And to me, it's frustrating, as I mentioned to the controller, that we had spent a great deal of money in the first budget to make sure that we had employees, 100 additional employees, that we had equipment, and I think the money back then was around $4 million. Is that correct, Pete? $4 million?
From what you showed me, yeah, it looked like that.
Yeah, it's
It
$4
was probably
million.
into the operating budget to enhance that.
So what I want to know is what happened to that $4 million, because the mayor said that we were doing it at the time, and we gave him his first budget because we wanted to be supportive. It was his first budget. He was the mayor. We wanted to give him what he needed. But what they said at the time was it was to make snow removal more efficient in the city. So with that money, we were hoping that there'd be more employees, there'd be better equipment, people would feel safer in the city and see at least some improvements. And including with the 311 system and the money we've put into there and the snowplow tracker, and just over the years since I've been here, we have spent money constantly trying to deliver better services to our residents. And yet somehow every year it seems like there's another issue, another problem. And most recently, we haven't really even had a bad snowstorm. To be honest with you, Controller, I went on a snowplow tracker with Bob Palmacino during Snowmageddon, and I'll never forget, he was riding down a street, the truck started to go sideways, the plow fell, and there was a hillside, the plow fell off, and he's answering his cell phone and his walkie-talkie, and he's driving with his elbow. My heart was racing. So, I mean, those crews go through a lot. But what happened was when the plow fell off, there wasn't even a screw to put it back on. He had to find a long nail and bend it around, wrap it around. That's how he got it on. And I couldn't wait to get home. And I wanted to share that video with people. But actually, Councilwoman Rudiak borrowed my camera at the time, and something happened with the video. But that was when they were really pounding away at Snowmageddon and at the employees and at the mayor. So that's why I'm trying to be mindful of that, because I thought it was really unfair at the time, because the employees I saw what they were going through, and I saw what they were doing. So I don't want to do that to anybody. But what I do want to say is, we've got to do better. We've got to do something here. I want to know where the money is, what did we do, where were the employees assigned, how many pieces of equipment did we order? That's what I want to know. Can any of you answer any of that? And I know, Controller, you said you'll get me some definite numbers, correct?
I just pulled the numbers. The fleet investment via the ELA and the capital budget in 21 was 10 million, 2022 12 million, 2023 7 million, 2024 9, 2025 6, and for 2026 through 2030 it'll be around 3 million annually. So, Three. What did I say? Sorry, 3 million a year, 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30 is what's currently what I'm looking at on my phone as being budgeted.
This being budgeted, but what
the
we did was we were supposed to buy equipment with that. So could you tell me, did we buy equipment? And Councilman Colker, you probably know some of this. Did we buy equipment? What pieces did we purchase, and where are they? And then I want to talk about the employees.
I was in a fire truck that was acquired in 2024 last Thursday. It was out of Station 8, and I believe the price tag on that was $1 million, roughly. So that is one of the $9 million.
Yeah, and that was out of fire, though. This was intended for.
I'm just sorry. The fleet.
Yeah.
It's my understanding from the budget that it doesn't.
But this
delineate.
was intended $4 million to
From the
snow
WESA
removal.
article. Yeah.
So going back to 2023, sorry, hang tight with me while I go through these spreadsheets. In 2023, and some of this is parks tax money, which thank goodness we're able to have park tax money, because that fleet is in much better shape because we've been able to use that to purchase vehicle.
And we're using them in the parks or on the streets or what?
We regularly use the parks vehicles for snow and winter ops. Like, it would be
You use it for both.
unmanageable.
I want people to know you're using it
Yes,
for parks.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
So I'm trying to get you to say.
Yeah.
In 2023, we were able to buy 8 one-ton crew cab dump trucks for
How many?
8, and that's for the Parks Division, and then just for the Streets Division, there was one, maybe 2 streets pickups, and that was 2023. 2024. Let's see. 2024, there was 6 crew cab 1-ton dump trucks, 4 parks maintenance, a crew cab pickup truck, and no pickup trucks.
Pickups, then we get 2 pickups?
In 24?
Yeah.
No. And then in 2025, I can go through the request actually for 2025 because
Wait, could you go back to the 24, how many again did you say?
6.
6 total.
Yes.
Okay, and that includes the pickup?
Hang on. 2024 was 6 1-ton dump trucks and 2 crew cab pickup trucks. And the majority of that was paid for with parks tax funding. And then in 2025, I'll go through the request and then what was actually funded. For parks, there was 2 crew cab dump trucks with plows and spreaders that were requested. And then in the streets division, there was 5 pickup trucks, single cabs for snow operations, and 3 1-ton dump trucks for the streets division. Of that got funded, the 2 crew cab dump trucks were funded with parks tax money, and we got 1 of the 3 1-ton dump trucks. None of the 5 pickup trucks for snow operations were able to be funded. Total, that would have been about $1.2 million if we funded all of those.
If we funded all of this.
Yeah, but we don't have that much money.
I know you're going to ask some follow-up questions, but and then could you tell me a little bit about the employees? How many did we hire? Where are they? You gave me a chart here, but it doesn't say where they're assigned. Could you tell me a little bit about this? I don't know if HR wants to address it or if you want to address it. Director.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Per the divisions themselves in terms of staffing, I don't have the, prior years right available to me, but we made that request in 2022 for additional staff. I believe it was specific to streets division. It was in the neighborhood of 13 additional drivers and 40 some additional laborers. So it was in a neighborhood of like 53 persons.
53, and we
Yeah.
funded 100?
And we previously were funded to like 100. So we augmented that by 53, specific to streets division. Specific
Could
to
you
the
get,
streets.
which divisions are they?
The first, second, third, and fourth. So current staffing is
None in the 5th, which serves the bigger,
fifth-
greater
the
area?
5th division.
Okay, I
is
wanna make
included.
sure.
Yeah. Pull your mic up. Oh, sorry. Yes, the 5th division, sorry. All divisions received additional
Okay.
staff, to be clear. So the current staffing levels, which again, we tried to, not every stat is not, we do not take the 153 and divide it by 5. All the divisions are of a different size, so we do try to match the staffing at division to the lane miles associated as our rough proxy of the work.
So which is the biggest division you have?
The biggest division, that actually is
The largest in terms of geographic miles.
the largest in terms of geographic road miles is the 2nd division.
Where is that? I don't even know.
That's,
Oh, why am I not
Yeah.
surprised? All of a sudden it got bigger. Because
it goes from East Hills to Bloomfield and Garfield, Shadyside, Point Breeze North, Homewood North, Homewood South, Leamington, Lincoln, Leamington,
you know where District 2 goes?
East.
From north side now, all the way up to the hilltop,
Okay.
all the way down to Ferrywood. So just saying.
Okay. Just
It's
saying.
the largest in terms of geographic miles, district in terms of geographic miles.
Geographic.
It's such a good job, we just get more.
Yeah, and that's like, I'll say that's, again, as a frame of reference, that's just the 2nd division has 265 road miles in the division. So it's already, 4.5 times as large as Munhall,
Yeah.
just to give you kind of a
I'm
scale
going to bring
there.
up Munhall. I mean, everybody's brought it up here today. I'm going to have a lot to say about that in a minute. Okay?
Smallest division in terms of lane miles is the 5th division. But, as I say, size doesn't matter. But it is the smallest. It has 193. So we factor those things in when we look at staffing. Current staffing now, total staffing available to each division. The 1st division has 35 persons. The 2nd division has 31 persons. The 3rd Division has 30 persons, the 4th Division has 30 persons, and the 5th Division has 26 persons.
But also some openings. I think they have 2 driver openings and 1 special operator opening. So
That's current.
about 30.
And there's 1 driver that's assigned to Heavy Equipment Division. So that's a total of 153. There are, in terms of vacancies, currently there are 22 vacancies related to snow and ice removal. 2 heavy equipment operators, 11 laborers, 7 truck drivers, and 2 truck driver special operators. That is current. There are an additional 8 staff that are unavailable due to workers' comp, long-term disability, short-term disability, just generally unavailable for work. So those are our staffing resources. There are some additional resources that support. I think it's super important that people understand that, like, it's not just about, it is an operation. It's not just about the driver and the truck spreading salt. We have available to us, 10 heavy equipment operators. We have, and these are all city staff positions, 7 equipment repair specialists. So those are the people that fix the plow when it breaks, that fix the spinner, the auger when it breaks. 3 parts specialists, 20 foremen, and 25 foremen.
Okay, and you brought up the spinner, and Councilwoman Warwick asked me to ask, are you training when sometimes those spinners stick? She said the auger, or they stick, the snow, the salt will stick inside, and employees have to get out of the vehicle to clear it. And she wants to know if it's their training. Are you making sure that new employees know that?
Yes, we do a training in the nicer weather, not just throw them to the wolves when the weather sours, but we do training usually overnight. Have them run the salt routes overnight, and then also equipment maintenance, plow, auger, spinner. Unfortunately, sometimes we do get clumps of salt in the loads, or else it's been in the elements and it's clumped up. So, they do get caught in the augers and jams them up. So they have to dig them out sometimes, and sometimes it's time consuming and takes them off the route.
And where and I hope I asked that the way she wanted to ask. And if she has any follow-up
I'm
questions.
sure
she
she'll
can
call me if I
No,
didn't
she
answer
will.
that.
Yeah. She's good about that. She also chairs this committee.
Yeah.
And you mentioned President's Day and the holiday weekend and people being off, but city employees weren't off for President's Day,
White
correct?
collar was not.
They were not?
Correct.
White collar's not. Blue collar is it's a blue collar holiday.
Oh, is it? Okay, I didn't know that.
PJCBC, yes.
That's good to know, because people are saying, well, you weren't even off. How are you saying that? So it's good to know, so
No,
thank you
yeah,
for
we were
clarifying. Okay, and then, so a couple things. How many salt trucks do we have? And I don't know if you answered this already, I apologize if you did. How many currently salt trucks do we own total?
Total equipment that is outfitted for snow and ice is 103.
103.
103.
And how many do we lease or rent?
8.
8, okay. And how old are the majority of the trucks? And can you provide us a list of all the trucks, the mileage, and the age of each vehicle? Can you provide that?
We would get it through our proxies of fleet maintenance, but
team,
yes,
Okay.
the fleet team would provide that
Okay,
information.
maybe you should send that to Pete for us.
say
I can do
average
that,
is
yeah.
a-
They have been very
Director, I'm
super
sorry.
responsive to get us some information. But Chris did mention this earlier. Overall, the DPW fleet, excluding the parks, is 11 years old on average.
Yeah, I keep seeing them, I would be honest, I keep seeing photos on Facebook of somebody towing away one of our vehicles. So, I mean, it is a serious situation for our employees and for our residents, of course.
We have some 2008s that we use. Does anybody in here have a 2008 automobile?
If my husband could keep it, he would.
Okay.
Too expensive to keep vehicles that old, isn't it? Yeah.
It's got classic plates on it.
Of all those vehicles, of the 103, how many are currently out of commission?
37.
37. Okay, and then this is a question somebody had sent to me. During the snow event a couple weekends ago, you mentioned that a third of the trucks were broken and out of commission, and that 68 trucks were available and ready to go. but you indicated in the news, I'm sure you probably got asked about this, that only 50 trucks were on the road. What was the issue? Did you have trouble getting drivers in?
No.
Okay, so could you
At
address
the
it?
onset of the storm, there was a bit of a struggle, I think, in staffing. But overnight, we had 50 persons in. I think what folks have to realize is, this is, when we approach snow and ice, this is not the last charge of the light brigade. It's not snow or death. We have to hold some trucks back. We have additional work that has to be done the following day. So, we always retain a certain percentage of trucks in reserve because vehicles go down in the midst of a snowstorm. We might need to take that person and give them a new vehicle. We might need an additional vehicle to reroute because of a staffing issue that may or may not have popped up. So we always retain some, 15, 20% of the fleet that's going to be not mobilized, but there to support us if we need it. If we didn't do that, it could become, we'd run out of trucks very, very quickly.
Okay, and these are just a few questions I'm going to go through that people have sent in. I have 2 sheets of them. If you're having staffing issues, why don't you return staffing drivers overnight? And I'm assuming this might be a union contractual issue or something. Why aren't you returning drivers overnight and on the weekends, especially during the winter months, instead of relying on call-ins? Since that doesn't seem to be working. Is that a contractual issue? I'm asking, I don't know.
Yeah, yes, we do staff at night. Again, I think to the President's Day storm event, if you will, the current of our contract is that is a paid holiday for them. So their participation in the snow event is going to be voluntary. We have a lot of, I think, benefits for them to consider that. But, again, it is a voluntary call out.
Okay.
So, speaking to addressing that challenge to make sure that we have folks on staff, we have measures to do that, but, we need time to work with our union members to, kind of solve that staffing problem with, if you will, to have more of a blanket coverage, so to speak.
Okay. And then is a third of the vehicles of the fleet still down, or have some of the trucks been repaired and back on the road, or have you had additional ones taken out as well? It's kind of like both, right?
Both things are true. There's
That's
some of the trucks have been repaired. Some of them have stayed unrepaired. Some of the new trucks have been down for maintenance.
Okay, that's that. Those people, and then so you already answered this question for another one. And then what materials were being spread, and if anti-skids materials were being used? They were saying at some point we said that we're just using salt, but they felt like they saw anti-skid materials down, and somebody posted some pictures or something of anti-skid materials. And so I think part of that is messaging. I'm going to be honest with you. I think it's communication, messaging. And I think when you just tell the public, look, we're going to lay this down because, or we don't know what materials we're going to use whatever we have to do to keep the roads clean or keep you safe.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the best message.
Right. Over the course of this winter so far, we have spread nothing but magnesium-coated salt. We did take on 2,000 tons of sand when we had the temperature challenges, and also our salt supply was challenged. So we went ahead and keep in reserve as an anti-skid for intersections and hills. We had this sand purchased, and somebody with a platform or a radio show got on and said that we're spreading sand. We never spread 1 grain of sand.
Yeah, no, it looked
Make
black
that
on the
clear.
photos I saw. I don't know what it was, to be honest with you. But that's what but we had heard that, and I did see some of the photos too, but I don't know I didn't see the media platform. This is on social media. I didn't see traditional media. But I think, again, that's the messaging. I mean, I think you need to say, we're going to lay down whatever we need to do we're going to do the best we can with what we have.
With what we have, certainly.
Yeah. And then the snowplow tracker doesn't always reflect the numbers that we're saying. Like if we say that there's 10 vehicles out, snowplow tracker will show 1 or 2, and people say, see, there's none in the West End. See, there's none in the South Hill. Usually that's true, but but you live in the West End, so I'll let you go on that one. But anyway, you live in, well, I should say District 2. But anyway, So could you talk a little bit about do you know about the tracker, how it's working?
Yeah,
Or not
I'm
working?
sure if it does come on, and I've asked for it to be taken down. We recently changed our automated vehicle locator to the AVL, as Bill mentioned. When we did that, the plumbing, so to speak, of how the data gets from our AVL to the snowplow tracker website mostly breaks. Some of those some of those digital relationships, if you will, still remain, so there might be there, but it's wholly inaccurate. Doesn't reflect the resources that we have out. So folks shouldn't use that. I felt like I had disconnected that prior, but perhaps there was some lingering data thing that I'm unaware of. But the snowplow tracker should not be operational, and if it is, it should not be trusted as a source of information.
Okay.
Not that it's a bad idea, but I wish it was a tool that would be created with some public input about what the public would want to see in terms of what's useful to them in terms of what's doing their work.
I know for me, I want to know what streets around me are done, and if the hills are done around me, so I can get off my street. And then I'd want to know, about when they're going to get to our area, that kind of stuff, because it's you can't tell anything from my street. Somebody said when I first moved there 40 years ago, don't judge the rest of the world by this street because it's almost never cleaned, you know what I mean? And so and that was 40 years ago. And now let me tell you, it's improved over the years in that regard because it's been cleaned a lot more. And that was not because I was elected. Believe me, I had more snow since I was elected and more tickets. so anyway, but I will say that I think that's some of the things most people want to know. They want to know when it's going to be safe for them to travel. And I also think that people need to be able to call their council member, and their council member needs to be able to call their supervisor to say, hey, we're getting calls about this street, and they need to be able to respond. Not say, hey, call 311. I'm never going to call 311. I'm elected. I'm here to represent people, and I think a lot of us feel that way. So I'm just going to say, if I ever hear that again, I'll be doing my own news conference because it will not be pretty. Because, you have to address our constituent concerns. So I'm going to say that part. But John's been good with us, but I don't know. I do know that other people have been told that. And then for me, this whole conversation about Munhall, it's something I've been paying attention to since the whole Wilkinsburg merger conversation came up. And I know that former Councilmember Kraus and I were honored by the Wilkinsburg residents for helping them maintain Wilkinsburg as Wilkinsburg and not become Pittsburgh, so they thanked us for that. But it wasn't that. And this is something I said back then, and I formed a task force, and they didn't really do that job either. But I looked into them. Maybe seeing what does a merger look like in the city, in Allegheny County. What does a city-county merger look like? Because I think what we're doing now is slowly putting things, merging this and slowly merging that. And eventually we'll say, we're merging all these things, allowing our schools to fall apart. So we can say, oh, well, now we need a new school district or work together for that. We'll have Allegheny County schools. So I think that and the thing that frustrates me, and this is not for any of you here, the thing that frustrates me is that I think if you actually had a conversation with residents, that's one thing, and you let them be a part of the conversation, decision making, but it's almost as if people are getting elected or getting connected to do to figure out ways to outsmart the people we're elected to represent, instead of representing what the people want. And so it's frustrating to me. It's like, let's have a real conversation with those who vote for us. And if it's a merger, that's one thing, let's talk about that. And how does that look? What does that look like? And what are your concerns? And how can we address it? Having a real conversation like adults instead of like, sneaking around like kids trying to figure out how we're going to do something different here. But for the Munhall part, it's concerning to me because there are contractual obligations there. And, I do think that there'll be unfair labor practice, things filed and all sorts of things. And I don't want to forget that these are our laborers that are doing such great things. But when you mention that they would want to make sure their areas are taken care of, and that's natural. Well, that's one of the things that concerns our residents. That if with any type of merger, that we will be last, and instead of having our own people doing their job and our own areas. And so we always say, can you imagine if there's a call in Esplin and there's a call in Mount Lebanon, where do you think they're going? So those are the things that concern our residents. And I think if you want to do these types of things, you better have real answers for people and tell them how you're going to support them and help provide real services to them, not just, the whole Munhall thing is, I mean, I wonder, was the union even part of this conversation? Any of the conversations? No, that you know of? Okay.
But it was strictly snow and ice. I mean, it wasn't a collective of any other services.
Yeah, well, it usually starts with one thing, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I mean, we do fire for Wilkinsburg,
Yeah.
and I think it works really well for Wilkinsburg. I haven't heard recently how it's working for
We
us.
do
locally.
garbage for
And garbage.
Wilkinsburg.
We do garbage collection, and we've had requests for Crafton and I think Mount Oliver maybe for animal care and control. I think, yeah,
The city also does medics for Mount Oliver.
for where
Mount Oliver.
Okay, so we're doing a lot of stuff for a lot, and I think we do get some things back in return because we did have for a while there where the county maintained all of East Carnegie for snow removal.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, so we do have some collaborations, but I just think to me, I just want us to have a real conversation with our residents. I don't want us to try to sneak by a merger. I want us to try to actually engage people. We always talk about engaging people and hearing everybody having a voice in it, but we don't really want to hear them. So I think, because if we did, we'd be having these conversations publicly with the people, not just with, other municipalities. Is there anything else for members? Yes,
Just thank you.
Councilman
Madam Chair.
Caldwell.
Just a couple quick follow-ups. Of the 37 vehicles that are down, what kind of condition are they in? Are we talking new engines? Are we talking new transmissions? Are we talking just a muffler? I mean, how many of those are ready for the scrapyard, I guess is what I'm trying to ask you, right?
Anything on that?
I don't have the actual details of the work order.
But it could be anything from oil changes to,
Yeah, some of
PM.
it's just going to be, some of it could be preventative maintenance, right? Like that includes the preventative maintenance folks. So, yeah, I don't actually have the specifics of the work order details in front of me. I just have the actual count of vehicles.
Right. The other thing was the Salt Dome on Route 51. It's in District 2, I shall add, but
he
That
finally
is
admits something's in District 2.
scheduled to be
He won't give me my
replaced.
Beachview Library.
you
which
keep
is
moving
nice.
into my neighborhoods. That's scheduled to be replaced. Is it still scheduled
that's
to
what
be
I
replaced?
understand.
Yes, it is. We should be going out to bid for that for 2026. We should be going out here sometime later this spring.
And it needs replaced.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it leaks.
Absolutely.
Does it leak? I
Yeah,
guess it leaks,
it's
yeah.
a terrible
It
condition.
looks horrible. I tell you, I can't stand the sight of it. That's why I
Same.
really want it. Yeah.
Same.
I didn't know if it was just because it was this ugliness of it or its actual.
No,
functionality. It leaks.
it's rapidly deteriorating from years of salt and
They all
water
are. They are.
infiltration.
First Division
Yes.
and the Second Division, Hamilton
Yes.
Avenue. They all are.
And at Moore Park, I'm sorry there, Councilman. Thank you. So, and at Moore Park, we store salt still. do we?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you first of all for paving that down there. It was long. I've been wanting that done for a long time, but we think, or at least the neighbors think, and I can understand this, that the 2-ton dump trucks filled with salt are probably what really damaged and
Larger
pounded
than that because the ones
right.
they ship with are
5-ton, right?
So,
Oh, yeah, right. Okay, so
Yeah.
the supply truck's coming in. That's yeah. So I'm afraid it's just going to,
well, I don't know what kind of
Kill all
base
that
work
work
they did.
we-
I know Mobility did that work, so I know they addressed the base. So
So we're still going to maintain that until the fourth. Once that 4th division is built, though, then we're not going to store salt there.
We haven't had a discussion about
Yeah,
whether or not
okay,
we're going to
yeah.
discontinue that as a salt location or not.
Got it. Yeah, I just worry about the roadway down there. It's used. The field's used a lot. People park down there, and it was how bad it was. So it's so nice right now. I just hate to see it get destroyed. Right.
Yeah, understood.
Now you said earlier the salt shortage. I look in that dump every time I go by it. I'm like, it's empty. It's empty. I've kept people were
Where,
telling me,
more?
oh, we're out of salt. No, 51.
F-51.
Yeah, they're saying we're out of salt, and I'm looking in there and I'm like, I don't see any salt. I did see a pile of cinders, or
You seeing these cinders?
cinder, sand. What is it? You
might
said
be
we
sand, yeah,
used
we-
sand.
we
Okay,
don't
well,
we didn't
sand-
mix anything.
Sand cinders. I thought
okay.
I figured it was all the same. Is it not the same? Okay. Okay. So we did run out of salt. We were getting close.
We did not, yeah.
We did not run out of salt.
No.
Let's be 100% clear. We did
Okay,
not run
right,
out of
right.
salt. We ordered material in the event because, again, as we all know, weather in Western Pennsylvania is unpredictable. We ordered material so that we could ensure that we had something to spread to keep residents safe. Again, this was to the communication issue. This was, again, explained in a press conference by myself for those exact reasons. And then, I can't help if media or social media personalities distort those facts. I mean, that's their responsibility for what message they put out there.
But we have ample amount of salt for the rest of this year
Yes.
in storage.
Yes.
Okay.
And on the salt question, just so everybody's aware, as Bill mentioned, magnesium chloride, for that 2-week stretch that we're referring to, I mean, we were taking and they were delivering salt as fast as they could make it. They could make 800 tons a day. They were delivering to us 800 tons a day. Our partners that make the salt and ship it to us are unbelievable. They're great partners to have. They're always there. If they can move it for us, they will. And they're always incredibly helpful for us. But the truth of the matter is that in that period of time, we were spreading it faster than we could make it.
And I'm glad, I remember when we regulated it not too long ago, and I screamed and cried, and finally, it was Mike Gable, who, we don't need to use that much salt. And I'm like, is he here still? I don't know. Okay. I didn't know he was here.
Regulated or deregulated? You gave the guys a little bit more freedom.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
So thank God for that, because one thing I don't want to save money on is salt. I mean, gosh almighty, it doesn't make any sense.
But
I will say this, now that, the snow has melted and it's warmed up a bit, and I don't know where we are in street cleaners, but, there is salt, like, collected at the side of the curb.
Rachel.
Like, my streets are white. Do we come in, can we come in and clean some of these streets?
Wait for a good rain.
Okay, so we're gonna wait for
Are you complaining about the
natural,
salt in front of
yeah.
your house, Councilman?
Exactly. I am not. I'd rather have salt piled up there from days and weeks of being
next
spread. So, no, but I would love to see it cleaned up. But so we'll just hope Mother Nature.
Yeah,
we're going
we
to count
hope.
on first.
Yeah,
and then,
we-
we do have street sweepers.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we function? Do we use them this time of year?
Yeah, weather permitting.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Go out. They should have been out today,
Right.
this week, really.
Right. And now the last thing is just closing streets. I know, like we use Capitol, for instance. Capitol, very dangerous. I really felt that was
Knew it.
a good policy.
Yeah.
All it takes is a little bit of a freeze, and there's no stopping on those streets. It's really brutal. It seems like it's common practice now, though. Is that right? Like anytime we're getting 2-3 inches or ice and snow, or the temperature dictates that, whereas we're being completely taking a very cautious measure as to making sure we shut those streets down. Because I've gotten calls saying, why did they shut the street down? It didn't even snow. I was like, oh,
Okay.
Yeah.
So, are we just automatically shutting a certain amount of hills or streets down every time there's a call, or do we
Well, I think we have a
monitor
number
them?
of streets, Newitt, you mentioned, Newitt,
Yeah.
Capitol, Rialto, South Negley, although it doesn't matter, they moved the barricades and
Yeah, right,
come down anyway, but,
right. Well,
they
travel
just
at your
don't-
own risk then.
right,
Yeah,
well,
that's right.
they just don't know any other way to go
Right,
somewhere.
right,
Yeah, just, yeah, for safety's sake, and then we can address it at length rather than trying to keep it open. We can come back to it and, hammer it and get it open.
Okay, my last question isn't for y'all, it's for the controller over here. And
Okay.
Rachel, where are we gonna find money for these vehicles? Are we? And what's the forecast looking from your end?
I would continue the city to explore relationships with our nonprofit partners. I think that isn't a faster fix than we need to continue to invest in downtown and making sure downtown stays vibrant. And we retain the jobs that are down here and look to continue to expand. But this is a unique time for municipalities across the country, and every downtown in America is dealing with similar issues. So we just need to make sure that we're being creative and looking at solutions and partnering with people elsewhere in government, including the governor, to make sure that we're doing everything that we possibly can. But yeah, we're in for some lean years, and it's Part of it was anticipated because of the bond payment that we punted from 2020 to 2026 and 27, I think. But yeah.
Yeah, when
it's
you
gonna be
say $3 million a year set aside for the next
And that
4
doesn't
years,
include
that is
parks
like-
tax vehicles, but that's from the capital budget.
It's just like,
Yeah.
I don't know how you even, I don't know how we maintain that. It's
Yeah.
going to be chaotic, I think. But as you said to nonprofits, I mean, for me, ambulances are $500,000 a pop, right? Why aren't we on the UPMC? We deliver their patients. Their patients pay their bills. I mean, it seems like it's not a question for anybody here at this table. I understand that, but you know, it's just a simple thing, and that's what you're talking about.
Yeah,
something
I
of
think,
that
and it's
nature,
what the
right?
most important part is getting all 5 of the large 5 nonprofit partners that operate in the city to come to the table.
Right,
And
right.
what the standing line has been, one will come when all of them come. So those conversations need to continue, or at a minimum, commence.
Yeah, that should be the
So.
easiest, lowest hanging fruit. They count on our roads to be plowed because their doctors and nurses and emergency personnel have to get there. Their patients have to get there. Count on our ambulances because they have to get there safe
Yeah.
and sound. And
They do well when we do well, and we do well when they do well. There's a shared success in partnership, and I would encourage the city as a whole to continue pursuing those relationships because I think they're very important.
well, thank you, Controller.
You know, just briefly, Councilman, when you were chair of Public Works, you said you consider Public Works as a first responder arm of the city.
right.
And is there any first responder money somewhere, federal or state,
Right.
to give us a new front loader to address floods? And, you know, we're the first ones in, the last ones out. We're wiping up the,
Yeah, right.
never mind, we're wiping up the
Yep.
slop, and everybody else is back in their garages and
That goes
back in
for
bed.
floods, that
Yeah.
goes for snow, that goes
Yes.
for all wind, trees, you name it. Yeah.
Wonder how much we save if we disband city planning. I'm sorry, just a thought. No, I wanted it on.
I second. Okay, now that's it for me, Madam Chair.
Thank
Thanks
you,
so much.
Councilman. And
I,
Councilman,
very quickly, this was something I meant to ask earlier, but help me with this math problem. So, we've got 2,400 lane miles that we need to clear if we're assuming that there's a back and forth on each road. We've got 65 trucks. We're assuming that each truck can travel about 5 miles an hour during a snow event. We should have everything cleared according to that in about 8 hours. What are the factors that I'm not counting in that?
You're not counting deadhead time when the truck is driving and not salting. So that's one of the factors. You're not counting potential downtime from the truck just needing maintenance or, you know, the driver just needing to stop to get something to eat or take a break or go to the restroom, you know, which they need.
Get loaded. And obviously, you're going to add time if you're plowing.
Truck getting loaded.
The truck is loaded with salt, yes.
Not on Carson Street.
Yes, yes.
Yes, getting a load of salt. And plowing adds another a lot of time to it. You know, turning around and a cul-de-sac with a plow on is a challenge sometimes.
Yeah, I think the other portion of that is that, you know, the road infrastructure itself, I haven't even gotten to this point, but Bill makes an excellent case, is that, you know, the conditions will also dictate how effective that is. If it's already been snowing and they're out and they're addressing that situation, you know, with some of these steep streets, don't say that 5 times fast, but you're going to have to back up and you're going to have to make multiple passes on the same street just to treat the entire length of it safely for the driver's own safety. Incredibly long dead ends. Some of those exist in your district, all the districts they exist. But you know, there's one pass down and not necessarily a pass of salt back coming out, whether they're backing down. So the backing down operation is certainly much slower than 5 miles per hour, that in and of itself, not to mention the deadhead time of just maneuvering. And obviously in tight quarters, they have to go slower than the 5 miles an hour, right? They have to be mindful of their plow blade. They have to be mindful of their turn radius if you're dealing with some of the particularly cramped neighborhoods in the north side, in Bloomfield and Lawrenceville, when you're addressing, their main road to their home is, if 8 feet wide might be generous. So there's some real operational challenges there that, the gross math just is difficult to capture.
Yeah, I think that's all. Unless I feel like we've been talking to you guys a lot, but are there anything else that you feel you need to say? I wanted to give you an opportunity. Okay, fair enough. Well, thank you very much. I know this continues to be a challenge, and we recognize the balancing act that everything we do in the city is. I was explaining to someone else just recently. It's like every department makes the case of why they need what they need, and they all do a good job, and everyone needs lots of things, but it comes on us. It becomes our responsibility to figure out that what is the risk that we can take this year? What is the thing we want to push off till we're out of this dangerous budget time? So.
No, thank you. I think the one thing I would point out from my perspective as a leader, as a department director, and I think Bill would echo this too, and the thing that I challenge my managers and supervisors every day is, what can we do better? What can we do better as individuals, not in, let's take away, asking for additional money, additional resources. What can we just do better, simpler now, without the technology? Whether it's, can we be smarter?
Do they need a shovel?
Yeah. Do they need, can we just load the truck correctly?
Yeah.
Like that type of thing. Like, how can we ensure that those things happen? Those are things that we've learned from the input from the real-time safety system, sir. And you know what? I think as that has proven, and Pete, I don't know if you have the data available to you, but I mean, we saw significant operational cost savings just with the implementation of that specific to public works, on the order of 6 figures. So these things can be done if we're all willing and able to roll up our sleeves and figure out how can we best support our people in the field, make things better, make sure that they're also making good decisions for themselves. One of the things that will colloquially frustrate me is when I hear about, well, we kept that truck, we didn't send it down to fix it because it kind of worked okay. And I'm like, does it work or does it not work? The answer to the question is yes or no. If it needs fixed, send it down to get fixed. If it doesn't need fixed, then keep it and operate it. It doesn't do you any good if it can only salt half the street. Now you're doing twice the work. And then it's eventually going to break anyways, and the repair is going to cost twice as much. It compounds the problem. We got to stop making choices that compound the problem. So that's what I ask myself. That's why I ask my team every day. I think Bill would attest to that. I'm probably a pain in the butt that way, but that is what I try to get out of it from our folks.
So one other thing, you brought this up
Councilman,
here.
I think Controller.
Well,
wants
the
to-
one thing I also wanted to flag, and Director Hornstein alluded to this, but when a vehicle goes to the garage, there's basically a triage process, and an ambulance takes the priority over a salt truck. And I'm not saying that that's wrong at all. I mean, we need ambulances on the street, but it takes away, when an ambulance goes down, that's where attention goes to, because you can't repair every vehicle all at one time. So I don't know if it's actually called triage, but that's how, and if a fire truck comes in and it's in a certain area, because, we have stations that are under construction, and based on where that truck is, that becomes the priority versus the salt truck or the pickup or whatever public works vehicle. So there's a lot of, that's why some trucks end up at the garage a lot longer, is because there are vehicles that take a higher priority. And I will not admit to knowing what that calculation is, but it's just something to think about when you're thinking about a vehicle that's out of service. There are other vehicles based on the number even out that will take priority because they only want to have 5 ambulances out instead of 7, and so their fleet gets basically sidelined. And then particularly with surprise snow events, we try to predict the weather, but we're not.
Well, I
perfect
think
at it.
during a weather event, I think we do take a little
Yeah.
priority.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'm just saying, like, when stuff suddenly happens and it's like 5 ambulances out, you're like, they're shifting around. And I think I will commend council for the changes that were made to the first vehicle agreement a year ago, but we're working on our office on enforcement mechanisms. I mean, but if the truck's out, the truck's out.
But we're all pulling on the same oar. We
Yeah.
all have the same thing in mind for service to the people.
But one other thing that, as we're talking, that has come up in a lot of different circumstances. Are we learning from other cities here? I think about this all the time, that it's funny we're talking about snow, but we are not a special snowflake in Pittsburgh. Other cities have the same challenges that we have. They have, declining revenue and whatever else might be that make our challenges here. Do we do the work to figure out what's worked well in other cities and what hasn't worked and how we can alter it?
Yeah, I look up, certainly myself. I mean, Bill, maintains relationships and contacts with other cities as well. But yeah, we try to canvass and see what's out there to stay current, if you want to use that parlance. Current trends, current challenges, how we resolve current challenges. We take some of that from the American Public Works Association. Some of that's just longstanding personal relationships. Some of it is, just looking for interesting case studies about how maybe the public was engaged on certain things and how that actually reduces work. I think the 311 case study is super interesting. I mean, Bill, you saw one related to potholes, right? That's out of the city of Houston. That was super interesting. That was a case. I mean, could you elaborate a little bit more?
Sure, it was a APWA conference I went to in St. Louis, but the city of Houston did a presentation that they did a PSA on potholes, and actually what they are, is the wear layer gone, that 1 inch. It makes for a rough ride, but it's not necessarily a pothole. You have some alligatoring, it makes for a rough ride, but it's not necessarily a pothole. And once you educate the public as to what a real pothole is, and I can probably show you a few right near my own Ross Street, but their calls to 311 decreased greatly once the public was aware of actually what is a pothole and what constitutes a pothole, and not just disrepair, alligatoring, bad base, wear layer, like I said. And sometimes cold patch won't hold in that wear layer, just that 1 inch that's gone. It won't hold. We'll have to wait till it either gets bigger or we get hot material.
I always think of just like, we don't need to invent anything in Pittsburgh. We can just steal ideas from other cities. And I hope that's something we start embracing more. It seems like sometimes there's like, well, you don't understand. Pittsburgh's different. It's like, we're not the only city that gets snow.
Yeah.
We're not the only city with hills. We're not the only Rust Belt city. We're not, so let's steal from our neighbors the best that we can and not make the same mistakes that they made.
Well, I'm going to wake up Alex back there, and I'm going to task him with making a video for the potholes that we can put on channel. Was it channel 14 now? What is it?
Well, thank you guys very much.
Thank you. And nothing else? Okay, and then I just really want to get and I just talked to our budget director a little bit, to get a complete list of all the grant funding we're spending and the money that we're spending on, and the monies that's needed for things that aren't funded in the city is what I want to see. If there's some way that we could fund some of these things that need funded, and then just take a break with the grants, and then maybe once we get back on more sound footing with the budget, they can revisit that when I'm not here. So I'll come down for my 3 minutes public comment. Assistant Director Holder, I had you sitting here this whole time. Is there anything you wanted to add or say?
No, thank you.
No.
I'm good. I just here for whatever you need me for.
Yeah. So with that said, I would just like to know how many employees totally have been added over the years to DPW, and any cost that's been returned to the budget that we haven't used or expensed from that $4 million is what I'm wanting to know. Okay. And Peter, Director McDevitt, if you can get some of that for us too.
Yeah.
And Controller, you're going to get us some information too, right? And so I just want to see how we can help you. And if it's taking money from one thing to buy some of the needed equipment, that's what we have to do. That's what we're elected to do. I think it's great giving some of the money out for some of the things that are doing some really amazing. Some groups are doing amazing work. Some, we hear a lot of complaints not doing as much or or anything at all. But we do know that there are some that do some great things. But with that said, as great as those things are, they can raise funds, they can do fundraising, they can do things, write grants. These dollars are paid for by our taxpayers to provide services to residents. And so if we need to do that, and because just for a year to take a break and do the things that we need to do, like make sure that you have equipment to remove snow, we need to do that. That's it for me. Is there any final comments anybody would like to make? No, I just want to thank you all because I know this is probably a very stressful time. Politics is always stressful when you get dragged right in the middle. But I do want you to know that we do see a lot of people working really hard, and we appreciate that. But we want the darn snow cleaned. but I want people to understand why it may not be getting done as the way it should be, as quickly. And I think a lot of it is that we're spending money on things that we, are redirecting it from things that, instead of things that we are responsible for doing. And I think that's it's not something new, but it's something more significant, I think, lately. And I think it's something we have to revisit and have some real conversations about. Anything else? Yes.
I just wanted to add, I want to thank you, first of all, for having this post-agenda. I think it helps explain to the residents, exactly why, or if we can't get the roads cleared for them. And I also wanted to say this is in no way a reflection of your employees. I mean, they're really great, every which one of them that I know works in my district. I get so many compliments on them. They went above and beyond. So it's just wanted to mention that.
Good to hear.
Yep.
Yeah. They can speak for you. They have a lot of credibility in our communities, and I just want to say that we appreciate them as well, too. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, that's it. Okay. The business of this post-agenda is concluded. Meeting's adjourned.